I thought the festival was a huge success. I want to thank everybody who helped and participated. I don't know where Jeanette is. I wish she was going to be in here, but she's right there. Just not in her usual spot, because I don't want to miss anybody. So I know I was not involved very much at all. Jeanette coordinated the whole thing with a team of people, so thank you, Jeanette. She worked really, really hard. She was here with me and Nick and Joanne and Ray. Was that it Friday night till about 11?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Yeah, till about 11, getting stuff ready. And then was running things yesterday and also ministering to people one after another, until after 6. And then we were all here until, I don't know, we finally finished dinner about 9? Last night? So thank you guys for all your hard work. And Christine we couldn't have done anything that we did without Christine in the back. You can kind of see the top of her head back there. But she worked really, really hard to get the meditation room going. So I'm just kind of pointing out the overachievers, if that's okay, because everybody got in and worked hard. So those are our overachievers for sure. And Christine, thank you. We owe you and the people I mentioned for eternity and beyond. For all your hard work, we couldn't have done it without anybody. Everybody's contribution was important, but they really went above and beyond. So let's just give them a hand. Thank you. Anyway, I thought it was a very successful event for our first event and for our first kickoff. And it's always tough when you're starting something new. It's even harder when you're killing off something old. So we are birthing something. I know for a few people, they're like, well, what is this exactly going to look like? Just hang around and you'll see. Because we're not really sure. We don't want to define it too much, because if you define things too much, you limit yourselves too much, right? Yes? All right, so let's stand up, kind of shift the energy a little bit, if you don't mind, in the room. Kind of just maybe roll your neck around a little bit, get your blood going again, stretch a little bit, wake up a little bit. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for people that have contributed and helped. Thank you for bringing us together, and we just ask for a flow of your Spirit to mightily work inside our lives and bring us to the place that you want us to be. Amen. You can be seated. So I want to invite you to think about this morning, how do you know what you know? How do you know what you know? And how, because our beliefs or our belief system, to a large degree, frames up for us how we express ourselves in the world. Is that not true? And beliefs are so important, but yet what are beliefs? What are beliefs? What's the difference between a thought and a belief? What is the difference between a thought and an emotion and a belief, if you ever thought about it? Or I could say it this way: what do you believe about beliefs? Because when you start exploring the world of belief, pretty soon you realize you've opened the abyss. And here's what I mean by that. You can never exhaust beliefs, because you cannot exist, you cannot really express yourself without having some kind of a belief. So then the question becomes, how did you get the beliefs that you have? Because to a large degree, they really are shaping your life. You will always experience what you believe. Now, one of the best examples of this, I don't show it anymore because too many people are familiar with it. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert on YouTube. Do they have YouTube spoiler alerts? Some of you in here have seen it, but you can YouTube a little video called The Invisible Gorilla. Anybody remember that? Anybody seen that? It's The Invisible Gorilla. So I'm going to, again, it's a spoiler alert because it won't work for you after I tell you about it. And it's just, like I said, not worth showing because Too many people have seen it. But the way it starts out is the goal, they give you a goal. There's about 5 or 6 kids on the basketball court. And they're passing a basketball around, and they tell you to count how many times the basketball gets passed around. And I've done this, when it first came out, people were less familiar with it. I've done it with small groups. I've done it with really large groups. I've done it, in other places, other venues. And it always works out the same way. So people will count, and I can't remember the exact count. I want to say it's like 15. There's 15 passes back and forth. And you'll ask people, how many times was the ball passed around? And people will get close to 15. You start to wonder about our ability to count, but because some people say 13, 14, 16, but anyway, it's close to 15. And then they ask you the question, how many of you saw the gorilla on the basketball court? Now, here's the interesting thing. If you've seen it before and you know there's supposed to be a gorilla on the basketball court, you see the gorilla. So every time I've shown it, I'm seeing the gorilla. So while they're passing the ball, there is a gorilla out there with the kids going like this in front of the camera, walking back and forth, like you can't miss it. But without exception, I have yet to meet a person who did not know to expect the gorilla who saw the gorilla. Without exception. The gorilla is literally invisible until you tell people there is going to be a gorilla. And the moment they know that there is going to be a gorilla, when they watch it again, guess what they're seeing? The gorilla. Because here's the dirty little secret. You have a limited amount of attention that you can pay. That's why we call it paying attention. Because to focus on one thing is to sacrifice focus on something else. That's why it's paying attention, right? So you're paying attention to the players and the ball. You're not paying attention to the gorilla. Why? Because your brain is designed to do something really amazing. Your brain is designed biologically, neurologically, is designed to edit and filter out information that is not important to you so that you can focus on what really matters. Because you have a limited ability to pay attention. So then the question becomes, how does the brain know what's important and what's not important? Now, it depends. If your life's in danger, your brain, you go into a fight or flight response, and automatically your biology shuts down everything that's important except the threat that's immediately in front of you so that you can fight or flight. Use all your energy on that, right? So there could be all kinds of stuff going on, all kinds of background noise, things like that. Like guaranteed, if you're in a big city and it's nighttime and there's the subway and there's horns and there's people and there's noise and all of a sudden you get mugged at knife point or something, I guarantee you're not going to hear, you're not going to necessarily remember all the background noise unless it's just part of the trauma that stays with you. But in that moment, you're not focused on the background noise, you're focused on the threat. You're able to shut down everything else and focus on the threat that's right in front of you, right? So the truth of the matter is that you never see or experience things as they are. You always see and experience things as they are important to you, as in the case of fight or flight, or as you believe. So you don't see the gorilla because you don't believe that you're supposed to see a gorilla. You don't think the point of the thing is the gorilla. So your brain literally blocks it out. So that what you and I live in is the world that our mind creates and then represents to ourselves as real. It's not the stimulus out here that we live in. It's the collection of the stimulus and then the way our brain makes a collective whole out of it by editing and distorting the information that's coming in and then representing it to ourselves. Then once we have that sort of neurological representation, once we have the sights, the sounds, the feelings, all that stuff, and our brain puts it together and says, okay, this is what's really out there, then we have a commentary that goes on based on, guess what? Our beliefs that is commenting to us about what's going on out there. And all of that shapes the direction of our life and allows information to come into us or prevents information from coming into us. So the moment you shift a belief, especially a core belief, which we'll get back to what is a belief in a minute, but here's the point. The moment you shift a core belief, you will see stuff and experience stuff that you didn't even know was there. Your life will change when you shift and change beliefs, literally meaning your experience will absolutely change. Right? Now that could be scary for people who need to be right. Because there's a funny thing about human beings. None of us experience the fullness of what's out there. If you really want to know the data is this. You're being hit with about 2 million pieces, little tiny bits of information at any given time. From what you're feeling, to what you're hearing, to what you're seeing. In the world at large, there's about 2 million pieces of information that your brain has to sort through. Your brain automatically eliminates all but 200,000 of those. All but 200,000 of those. Then, from that place, from that 200,000, you can consciously focus on 5 to 9 of those things at any point in given time. Now, that's just scientific research. So that means of the 2 million things that are going on out there, you're only consciously aware and focused on 5 to 9 of those. And so that's our problem, because I'm focused on a certain 5 to 9 pieces of information, and maybe Lori's focused on a certain 5 to 9 pieces of information that's different, and Brian's focused on another 5 to 9 pieces of information that's totally different, and then we argue about what happened. Because my way is right, and the way I experienced it, and the way I think about it, and that's right, and everybody else is full of shit, right? Right? Because that's not how it happened. So that's part of our problem. But then we have to understand too that our beliefs are guiding this. So back to what is a belief? What is the difference between a thought and a belief? Well, the first thing that psychologists tell us is that it's not a belief if it doesn't have emotion in it. If there's no feeling to it, if there's no emotion to it, you don't really believe it. So if you want to know what you really believe, you've got to know how you're feeling about a situation. It's more important to feel about a situation than think about a situation. Not because we just want to be, like the 60s love children, just how does it feel? But the truth is you get more accurate information about yourself and about a situation when you feel about it than when you think about it. Because what you're feeling about it is letting you know what you really believe about it. And what you believe about it is far more important than what you think about it. Because your thoughts will come and go. I mean, how many of you have random thoughts through the day? How many of you ever just took a day and paid attention to all the rambling that goes on in your brain? All the talking back and forth and talking to yourself and commentary, that internal commentary. Like really paid attention to it. And then what's really funny, and I can tell you this as a therapist, people who externalize what they're thinking, like people be tormented by thoughts, right? You ever been tormented by a thought? You ever been just tortured by a thought? Or lost your confidence? Maybe you're not tormented, but you lose your confidence in certain situations. Like in certain contexts, doing certain things, you can be very confident, but then in a totally different context, doing something else, maybe something you haven't done before, maybe something that you've failed at in the past, and you get in that context, and so now all of a sudden you don't have as much confidence. You know what I'm talking about? And then you start paying attention to those contexts in your life where you feel torment, those contexts in your life where you don't feel confident, and you start listening to the commentary that's going on in your brain. And here's the most interesting thing in the world. Oftentimes when people talk about it for the first time, they become aware of it for the first time, and they start talking about it, and they simply externalize, they will say to themselves, wow, this feels silly, this feels stupid, I know this isn't true, but, and just the fact of actually saying it out loud helps the person realize all the nonsense that's been driving them that they have been believing in that moment, but they really don't believe. Are you tracking with me? So if you were to take a day and just listen to all the commentary in your mind, you would realize that there are times you babble like an insane person. Like if you just said, like nobody says, I'm just going to give voice, well, most people, I bet a few exceptions that didn't have mental illness. I'm going to give voice to every thought that pops into my head. Like if you just did that, if you just walked around all day long and you just said everything you heard in your brain, people would think you were crazy, right? And that can be a factor in certain mental illnesses where people don't have a filter like that. It's really true, right? But we're all crazy, we just filter it better. Well, it's the truth. Right? So you don't believe all that junk. So then the question becomes, so your belief is what you invest an emotion in. So when there's information and there's feeling, then you have the beginning of a belief. So you could look at it as a triangle. A belief is thought, feeling, but beneath all of that is affirmation. It's affirmation. At some point inside yourself, you say, yes, this is true. So I take information, which is the thought. I take the emotion, which I have about the thought. I put it together, and then I affirm it and say, this is true. This is how it is. And then we form clusters of beliefs. We have beliefs about ourselves. This is who I am. This is how I am. This is what my limitations are. This is what my abilities are. This is what my strengths are. This is what my weaknesses are, right? And we do that throughout life, and then we store it in the subconscious so you don't have to think about it. Otherwise, you'd have to think every single time you went to express yourself. How many are glad you don't have to think about walking like you had to think about walking when you were 2 years old? Or 1 year old, or whatever, whenever we start walking. You see what I'm saying? I mean, it's amazing. When you start training children, you realize how much, goes into the subconscious, like going to the bathroom. Like remembering to go. Like no adult says, I forgot to go. Like no adult gets the alarm, I got to go to the bathroom, and says, what do I do? And just lets it go because I forgot. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Right? Because all that stuff you do at an unconscious level. You're able to sit down, you're able to walk, we're able to talk. Think about learning language. Everything I'm saying, you're processing and able to understand because your subconscious works so marvelously. You don't have to sit there and think it through like you did when you were learning to read, learning the alphabet, all that stuff. All that stuff you did not come into the world knowing. All that stuff somebody had to teach you, and all that stuff went through this process of belief. Believe me, I never would have learned math if there wasn't emotion attached to it. I said, why do I need to do this? Because if I don't do my homework, I'm going to be punished. If I don't get my spelling words right, I got to write them over and over and over again. And I hate the emotion of sitting here, the boredom and the drudgery of writing that over and over and over again. So there's thought, there's emotion. Then I get feedback. Yes, you spelled it right. Now there's affirmation. So now I believe you spelled the word spell, S-P-E-L-L. And then it gets stored in my subconscious and I don't ever have to think about it. So that's how we get through life. The problem is that we store all kinds of beliefs about ourselves as well. They can be affirming beliefs, saying, hey, I'm capable, I'm able, I'm unlimited, I'm whatever, right? Or they could be very demeaning. I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, I'm powerless, I'm incapable, whatever the case may be. But the point is, you've already gone through this process of thinking it, feeling it, and affirming it as true, and then boom, it gets stored. But here's the thing, it literally gets stored somewhere in your body. It literally gets stored somewhere in your nervous system. So now when you're presented with information that's opposite to that, you can use, what do you say? That doesn't feel right. I know that's not true. How do you know it's not true? It's not that it's not necessarily objectively real. It just means that to you, it's not true. Just like if I showed the video of the invisible gorilla and I said, anybody see the invisible gorilla? Everybody who did not see the invisible gorilla is saying there was no gorilla. Right? And you know what? They're right. Because in their experience, there was no gorilla. But the moment they open up to the possibility of seeing the gorilla, guess what? Because the gorilla is there. You get it? So there's this really weird interplay between what's really objectively real and what's subjectively just the experience of our own experience. Right? That's just life in general. That's just basic life. That's just doing life out here. Everybody does it. In fact, you can't not do it. But then we get into philosophical stuff, and we get into theological stuff, and we start talking about God, and we start talking about spirit, and we start talking about heaven, and we start talking about what happens after we die, and all these really important existential questions, right? Like, who am I? Why am I here? How does the world work? What are people about? What is life about? What is the purpose of my life? What is God like? What is the devil like? Now we're dealing with a whole different way of cultivating a point of view. And that's why when it comes to and yet they're so powerful for us. Like if I was raised, which I was, with Bible stories, my mom would read me Bible stories, every night. I don't know if it was every night, but a lot of nights before I went to bed. I went to church, I learned all the songs, I went to Sunday school, I did all that stuff, right? Grew up every Sunday in church, the whole thing. And so what's being formed in me that is defining things like cosmology, things like what's out there? And so if I'm really honest, at some point, the way my world was structured was up in the sky somewhere, was heaven. And that's where people went when they died. And up in the sky somewhere out there was God. And under the earth somewhere was this infernal place. This infernal place called hell, where all the devils and the pitchforks resided and where bad people went when they died. Right? And then I got the message that, Jesus died. God had to forgive me of my sins. Jesus died to forgive me of my sins, which presupposes, and presuppositions are dangerous because they're beliefs that slide in without you being aware of it. Let me give you one. How many of you, don't raise your hand, just answer internally. How many of you believe God is merciful? Okay. Do you realize that in order to believe God is merciful, you have to presuppose that God is judgmental? Because mercy presupposes that God has to have mercy, but he should be judging you. What's the opposite of mercy? People say, well, mercy is getting what you, not getting what you deserve, right? So if somebody, if the hangman is going to hang you or whatever, you go before the judge, you say, well, have mercy on me. Yeah, I deserve this. Yes, I'm wrong, but have mercy on me. So you can't even hold the concept of mercy without the presupposition that there's something wrong with you, that you need mercy in the first place. You can't hold the idea of mercy without the presupposition that you are undeserving to begin with. You cannot hold the idea of mercy without presupposing that you are wrong to begin with. So you've already built a position of wrongness and undeservingness and judgment before you can talk about, oh, isn't it wonderful that God is so merciful? Because those are all presuppositions. Those are all things that you have to hold true in order to believe even in the concept of mercy. And so presuppositions slide in. So when they tell you Jesus died for your sins, what do you have to presuppose? I sinned. Well, how do I know I sinned? Well, I don't know. Mom told me I should be ashamed of myself for using a cuss word, washed my mouth out with soap, and it didn't take, obviously. Sorry, Mom. I felt really bad about that. I didn't finish my homework. I pulled my sister's hair. right? So now the construct, my own family and social construct that has produced for me a feeling of feeling bad, when my parents are trying to teach me proper social ways, or the social ways that they knew and that they believed in. So they're trying to form my character in that way, right? Don't argue with your sister, don't pull your sister's hair, whatever the case may be. Right? So now I've got all that interplaying, and so they say, well, Jesus died to forgive you of your sins. And so if you're a Catholic, you go to a church where you see Jesus. I can't tell you how many Catholics I've talked to who are traumatized just by the crucifix in their church as little kids. I just worked with one on Friday. Horrible trauma. We start getting to the root of his trauma, and he's scared to death that he is going to go to hell. Tormented. Where did you learn that? I was raised in a very strict Catholic church. And I just won't forget. And then he wasn't able to conform his life to what they taught him. And then you're left with the question, am I really doing enough? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who's right? Because the Catholics are saying they're the ones that are right, and you have to be baptized in the Catholic Church and take the sacraments. But then you have the Protestants who say, no, you're depending on your works. If you're depending on the sacraments, you have to have faith. Well, what is faith? Well, you have to believe. Well, what does it mean to believe? And then you have the Baptists that say it's just 10 of us. Sorry, 10 of us. I'm kidding. Unless you've been to some of these really small fundamentalist Baptist churches, you won't get that. But I mean, I'm just saying there are groups out there that say it's only our group. Like I seriously knew a Baptist group that had a small group, and it was only people that knew them or went to their church or whatever that were saved. So it was just like the Catholic Church, but the Catholic at least has millions. The Jehovah's Witnesses will at least have 144,000. I don't know, I guess a couple get kicked out every now and then when they make new converts. I'm going to tell you what, right now, if I was a Jehovah's Witness, and no disrespect to anybody that was Jehovah's Witness, I would not go knock on doors. No way in hell would I go knock on doors. Or if I did knock on doors, I'd be like, you want my pamphlet? No? Oh, okay, good. Because if there is only 144,000 people going, I mean, this is how crazy, though, beliefs can get. Because they tell you there's only going to be 144,000 in the kingdom, why in the hell are you going to go knock on somebody's door and try to convert them? Because you might get bumped. Yeah. I'm just saying, you might get bumped. You might get bumped. So, I mean, talk about working at cross purposes with your own salvation. Hallelujah. What? How many of us get saved? 144,000. What's the church membership? 20,000. Now let's go out and grow it. No, I like a cushion I like a cushion when it comes to my eternity. But seriously, this kid that I'm working with, just in torment, and he looks up and he says to me, who tells a child about hell? He says, because it's not like you can just give up that belief like you give up a belief in Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I thought, yeah, that's true. So, but see, no, now here's my question. How do we know? Because see, as a child, when I'm reading Bible stories, it's easy for me to receive the worldview of ancient people who did not know, scientifically at least, what we know today. In the biblical worldview, you got to understand that they didn't even really have outer space. They had the earth, and then they believed there was a canopy of water over the earth, and that's where the rain came from. And they didn't understand stars and planets as being suns and other habitable spheres like Earth. They believed that they represented stories and the gods and the activities in the heavens. Right? That's why in Revelation, in the book of Revelation, when the dragon falls and a tail sweeps 2/3 of the stars that fall, because those were angels. See, people who believe in one God, monotheistic, want to get upset with ancient people who had pantheons, who were polytheistic. They had many gods that represented different energies in the universe. Don't realize that the church has a pantheon as well. It's just the angels. All they did was change the name. Okay, well, just walk on. So, but here's my point. So you have this worldview that God's out there and heaven's out there, and as a child, it's really easy to receive that. But what happens when you begin to understand that there is no canopy of water up there, and there might be molten lava at the center of the earth, but there's no devil in there or people suffering? You know what I'm saying? So then those things start to break down. But emotionally, that's hard to deal with. It's not just a thought, it's not just logical, it's a belief structure that has emotion attached to it, that has very early learnings attached to it, that has a lot of subconscious stuff attached to it. Right? So when you give that stuff up, yeah, it's not like just giving up belief in Santa Claus, because you're giving up who you are, your understanding of the world, where you fit in the world, and you're giving up all that security that belief system provided for you. But let's just step back from it and be really, really honest. When it comes to most of our religious beliefs, how do we know what we know is really true? And for the most part, if we're honest, we're taking someone else's word for it. If we're really honest, we would say to ourselves, I don't really know because I haven't really experienced it for myself. I don't have enough experience. I don't have enough information to really know. So because I know that I don't know, see, this is what's going on at an unconscious level. Because I know that I don't know, I'm going to take someone else's word for it. I'm going to take my church's word for it. I'm going to take tradition's word for it. I'm going to take the Bible's word for it. I'm going to take the church father's word for it. I'm going to take my favorite teacher or preacher's word for it. You can go on down the list. Right? So what would happen, but it's dishonest. We're not honest with ourselves if we don't say, I don't really know. And so then what that causes us to do is to surrender the power, watch this, surrender the power of our own experience, surrender the power of our own potential, and maybe most importantly and most tragically, surrender the power of our own life expression. Our own ability to think for ourselves. Our own ability to choose for ourselves. And so, on the one hand, I think we need to, I put something up on Facebook because I've really been mulling this over. Like it's just amazing to watch people. When you work with people who are suffering, you work with people who are hurting, bitter, depressed, anxious, fearful, hateful. And you do the right interventions with them. And here's what I mean by that. You don't tell them what to think, but you begin to free them up from the energy of all those patterns. You begin to challenge their worldview as just that, a worldview, not as reality. This stuff isn't real. You're not worthless. That has no existence in objective reality. That only exists between your ears. that only exists as a neurological firing that you feel in your body as an emotion. That's the only place it exists. And the only life it has is the life you're choosing to continue to give it. So you challenge those things, and as people are able to surrender those patterns and they're able to shift their energy, it's amazing how on their own they start to inform themselves and they begin to move towards positive and empowering beliefs. They begin to move towards forgiveness. They begin to move towards unconditional love. Amen. Now see, I've had that experience over and over and over and over again with people, and that just does not jive with this idea that somehow you are inherently broken and evil and predisposed to doing bad things, which is what the church in the Western world, all of it has in common. So we are either wired inherently towards destruction, evil, or we're wired inherently towards life and positivity and unconditional love. It's one or the other. And I suppose maybe it could be a mixture. Maybe some people are wired that way, but my experience has been almost without exception that just like your body will heal itself physically, that you are wired to self-correct and get yourself on the right path. And that's the exact opposite of what the church tells you. So I no longer want to try to get healed of something that someone else told me I had. And I don't want to try to convince people I have an answer to a problem that doesn't exist, that I created for them. You're lost and you need to be saved. You're a sinner and you need to be forgiven. You're rotten to the core and your heart needs to be changed. And here's how you do it. But the problem is, it never happens. It just creates division and denial and repression and suppression. Yes. Oh, okay, I'm going to suppress all that stuff because I can't be that. I'm supposed to be this. I mean, I've met people that you could see the anger on their face, and they say, well, I've forgiven this person because I know I'm supposed to forgive him. Like, you haven't forgiven them. But you know, if you don't forgive other people, God ain't going to forgive you, and if God didn't forgive you, you're going to go to hell. So it behooves you to pretend that you forgave them. Just like it behooves the Jehovah's Witness to stay home on Witnessing Saturday. Don't you think that's funny? I think that's funny. So where was I with all that? So I got to bring this home. I'm going too long. So I put on Facebook, I said, I no longer want to listen to people who presuppose a problem. The Christians don't agree on anything. They don't agree on sacraments. They don't agree on grace. They don't agree on gifts of the Spirit. They don't agree. I mean, they don't agree on how it's going to end. Rapture, no rapture, whatever, like nothing, right? Except their little group. And then they divide. Like they're like dividing cells. They just find some new belief to divide over. It's true. But the one thing they all have in common, you're messed up. You're messed up. The one thing they all have in common is guilt and shame. And we can provide the answer for that, right? And so I just posted that to Facebook, and some guy, man, it was so funny. Because by the time I got back to my thread, I had like 80 comments or something on the thread. By the time I got back to my thread, this guy had posted like 6. Like, he was raging. I mean, you could see it. He like post something, and then like a few minutes go by, I'd be like, you know what was going on in his head. You know it just got to him. It just like, and I love doing that because it's like planting little viruses in their system, because they can't just shut it off and walk away from it. They keep wrestling with it. You know, I think, oh, that's so good. You know, it's so good. And so like you could tell, oh, and here's another thing, and you know, and oh, and here's another thing. And sometimes I'll argue with them just for fun or just to help people because I want to help them think through stuff. Sometimes it's just cathartic. I had a bad day, and so, you know. You know, if you follow me on Facebook, I ever go really manic on Facebook with comments about theology, just know I'm working something out. Because I know invariably somebody's going to come back and I'm going to have a good argument and feel better. But anyway, I looked at this guy, and my reply was, take a Xanax, bro, it'll be okay. But here's my point. We need to take a Xanax on some of this stuff. You know what that is? That's like a chill pill. It's a benzodiazepine. It like mellows you out when you get anxious and upset. Like, we just need to chill out. And there is a level of humility to accept our own limitations and say, I don't know everything there is to know. But you know what? That I'm okay. It's these other belief systems that tell you you have to know to be okay. It's okay not to know. And then what I would say, the second thing that I would encourage or invite you to think about as an impossibility, or something I would invite you to do, is look at your own life. Like, take charge and responsibility for your own life and your own expression of yourself. When I'm talking about your life, listen, there are tons of things in your life you can't control. And I don't buy into this thing that you attract everything that happens to you in your life. There's just too many factors, right? So we're just thrown into things. And bad things happen, and good things happen, and life has its ups and downs and all that stuff. And the only thing that you and I can really be in charge of is how we express ourselves, how we show up for our life, and how we choose to express ourselves in the various contexts of our life. See, a lot of people, if people are doing drugs, if they're doing alcohol, if they're watching too much television, if they're into too much social media, all this stuff to distract and avoid, and you don't show up for your life because there's feelings and stuff inside you that you want to avoid, and you can feel like a fragment that's just kind of being floating around, and like you have no emotional choice, you have no choice about how you express yourself. And I want to, if there's anything, what I want to encourage you to do is claim back your individual power, claim back your individual personhood, and be able to find out for yourself how you feel, what feels good, what feels right, what feels, where's my vibration right now? Am I divided against myself? See, don't let somebody else's rules divide you against yourself. Don't just do something because that's what you're supposed to do, or that's what you should do, or that's what you ought to do. You know? And then sit there and wrestle with yourself and be miserable because a big part of you can't get on board with that. Step back from it. Negotiate within yourself. Why can't this part get on board? What is this part wanting by getting on board? And what is this part wanting by not getting on board? And how can we work this out so that at some point you can begin to come into a place of congruence? You can begin to come in a place of alliance with yourself. Right? Making peace within yourself. And then showing up for your life and choosing how you choose to express yourself in the various contexts and circumstances of life. Not living by somebody else's rules, not living by somebody else's belief systems, not being in bondage to things that you know you don't know because you haven't experienced them. You're just taking somebody else's word for it. People will do stuff because they think it's in the Bible. They don't even know what the Bible says. They don't spend any time reading their Bible. They really don't. The best they get is a Promise Box devotional thing in the morning or something. Yeah. Or Joel Osteen's little 2-minute encouragement or whatever. BibleGateway.com sent you your verse for the day. And then you're saying you're living by the Bible, but really you're living out of your own fear. You're living out of your own unconscious programming. So if there's anything about awakening that's important, that I want to say, and then I'm done. Awaken to your own belief system. Awaken to the way you are creating your own subjective reality by how you're choosing to feel and choosing to believe, and the rules that you're choosing to follow. And then claim back your power, and if something's not working for you, don't be afraid to let it go. Don't be afraid to say, and don't feel bad about it, and don't be ashamed, and don't say, oh my God, I wasted so much of my life believing that junk. No, that served you for a season in your life that got you to the place that you are now. And if you hadn't needed that, you wouldn't have gone through it, and so it was perfect the way it was. But you don't have to stay in bondage to it. You don't have to continue in it. You can let it go. And whatever's not serving you, and you can reinvent yourself anytime you want to. Don't buy into this thing that this is just the way I am. You can reinvent yourself. You can change anything about yourself that you want to change by doing enough work to change the underlying beliefs and presuppositions that have caused you to express yourself that way in those contexts. I refuse to be defined by an Enneagram. I refuse to be defined by a Myers-Briggs. I refuse to be defined by any other kind of personality thing. All that is telling me is this is how I've been expressing myself up till now, but if I buy into it, it's going to limit me. And so what I choose to believe is that I can experience and have, in terms of how I express myself, anything I want if I do the work to change it. Then I have to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because it ain't easy. It's not easy to challenge beliefs, long-held beliefs within yourself. It's not easy to let go. It's not like giving up Santa Claus. There is a dark valley in between you and that change of hard work. And depending on the gravity of the belief depends on the amount of work that has to be done. But listen, the more you can shift a core belief, one core belief, the more you can change your experience. You can open up to all kinds of invisible gorillas and have all kinds of experiences that you never knew were even available to you if you do the work. God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you for coming and listening. God bless you. Have a great day.